Before we get started, please go over to Amazon.com and grab a copy of my book, Education and Justice. If you have an African-American son in public school, you need this book because I teach you the many ways that public schools mistreat African-American boys and what you can do to help your son. So go over there and get your copy immediately. Hey family, I hope you all are doing well. So this is a second video regarding those same white Christian nationalist pastors that I shared with you yesterday. And I acknowledge these videos are heavy and hard to watch. The level of hatred is deep. And you have asked some great questions and made some really great remarks that I feel the need to address. So one subscriber said videos like this have radicalized him for the worse. I'm not sure what he meant. However, I want to caution everyone not to allow these folks' hate to push us into negative, violent, hateful radicalization or anything reckless like that. That's who they are. That's not who we are. And it's exactly what they want us to do. So instead of that, what we must do is harness that anger, that frustration, that pain into something positive, something strategic and effective. For example, boycott certain corporations. That's effective. Or financially support the organizations and people who are out here fighting this junk. Also, take the time to teach the next generation. So there are many different ways that you can use that energy to build power, not destroy yourself or others. In other words, what I'm saying is crashing out doesn't help our people. It sets us back and it gives them more excuses to be hateful. I share these videos to inspire you to act righteously, to fight back with love and reason and lawsuits and prayer and other positive means, but definitely not with rage. We followed the example of Jesus and Dr. King, who used the ballot box, not bullets, not looting, not rioting, and so on. Remember, our ancestors faced even greater hatred and stood tall. So we got to do the very same thing. Never resort to any kind of violence. It's all about being peaceful, yet determined. Then another family member asked whether we should even spend time on these hateful comments and just ignore them so that they can fade away without giving them any energy, any oxygen. Well, here's why it's urgent that we respond and don't ignore these hateful comments. First, these hateful comments won't fade away. Because the two men in the video that you see aren't random people. They're pastors. And they're part of a larger movement that has the president's ear. And their racist rhetoric can shape racist executive policies that affect our entire community. Second, their rhetoric helps justify racist state and local legislation and ordinances and regulations and rules that entrenches this systemic inequality at every level of government. Third, they're pushing a dangerous narrative about black men that can lead to harmful and targeted policies, especially affecting black men. Fourth, they're sowing racial hatred among white Americans to build public support for dismantling the Civil Rights Act. That's their real target. That's their real objective. Fifth, silence allows their lies, think about it, to spread unchecked, and younger black people might internalize that racism. That is, if no one challenges this racist narrative. 6, many younger black men are being pulled toward MAGA without understanding its anti-black racist roots. So exposing these races is necessary to protect our younger community. Remember, an increasing number of young black men voted for Trump in 2024. So we got to protect them from deception and disinformation. And finally, and what I find really offensive, is these two pastors use the Bible to justify their hate. And I will not be silent as they misrepresent Jesus, his word, and his kingdom. So no, silence is not strategic. It's not a strategy. Peacefully and positively confronting these races is a strategy. So again, go ahead and watch this video. It is heavy. I'm warning you. And I got one coming that's equally, if not more heavy. But we must expose and respond to these people. All right? So here's the next video.
As the tired sun faded at the edge of the horizon and a long day came to a close, a young husband and wife were going about their late evening routine in the rural countryside. The man, Johann, was a self-employed cabinet maker by trade, and in his spare time ran a small rental farm with his wife, Mariandra. Like a gaggle of happy ducklings, they always had their 3 small children from age 6 to 2 trailing behind them as they went about their chores. When he wasn't tending his own chickens or garden, Johann also worked for other local farmers to earn extra cash and hopefully learn the generational skills necessary for owning and operating his own farm, a quiet and lifelong dream that he and Mariandra shared. They had been happily married for almost a decade, and after a hard September's day of work, were now settling down in their living room with their youngsters. One by one, with the TV providing background noise, they dozed off to catch some much-needed sleep. At some point, Mariandra, who was expecting a 4th child at any moment, scooped up her 2 youngest and took them to their own beds for a more comfortable night's rest. When she returned, she snuggled in with her husband on the couch, who was soundly asleep, and their 6-year-old daughter asleep on a small cushion next to them. It was a picturesque scene, a hardworking family at rest, as the noise and sounds of an otherwise busy farm emptied themselves into the quiet hush of night.
Hey family, do you believe in the work we're doing? Does our content speak to you? Do you appreciate our in-depth legal analysis and political commentary from an African-American perspective? Do you believe it matters to our community? Then don't just watch from the sidelines. Please click that membership button and become a member of the 2% Club today. That's right, we need just 2% of our subscribers to become channel members. For just $4.99 a month, that's less than 20 cents a day, you'll help us keep creating powerful content that defends our democracy, demands justice, and develops a strong African-American community. But if you want more, at $9.99 a month, which is only 33 cents a day, you'll get access to exclusive members-only live streams, bonus content, and behind-the-scenes updates. And for just $14.99 a month, which is under 50 cents a day, our top-tier members get access to live Zone calls, strategy sessions, and a direct voice in shaping this movement. We're not just building a YouTube channel. Folks, we're building a movement based on righteousness and justice, just what our community needs in a time of disinformation and division. So if you believe in what we're doing, click the membership button, join now. Become a member of the 2% Club today. Let's build something powerful together.
But suddenly, the stillness of the dark night was pierced by the staccato barks and growls of their dogs outside. Roused from her slumber, Mariandra tried to nudge Johann awake, but after she peered through the windows and saw nothing, she let him sleep. He said, barely awake, "It's probably just a cat." Having checked all the doors and locks, Mariandra felt reassured and in turn laid back down next to her husband in their 2nd-story living room. She heard one of their youngsters walking down the hallway, or so she thought, coming to see what the commotion was all about. Except, instead of a toddler, she heard the action of a shotgun being worked. By the time she bolted straight up, she was staring down the barrel of a gun, and behind that, 2 black men. In a moment, she realized what was happening. Panic and adrenaline shot through her veins, and any thought of sleep fled. Mariandra screamed hysterically. In an instant, Johann was awake and their daughter too. The armed black robbers demanded money and valuables. Johann, trying to calm them, said they could take whatever they wanted and told them even where to find the most expensive possessions in the house. He told them where the car and the keys to it were. Still calm, he said, "Take whatever you want, but please don't hurt my family." As though uttered from a soulless demon, the empty-handed black said, gesturing to the man with the shotgun, "Do you see this man here?" Johann looked right at him as the man continued, icy and cool. "This man is a killer, and he's here to kill you." In an instant that could have been a split second or an eternity, gunshots rang out in the farmhouse night, ripping Mariandra's world apart. The killer's first shots were not assigned to her or her husband, but aim had been taken on their daughter, who had darted behind her father on the couch. Having missed, the gunman turned and spent the next 5 shells in Johann's chest and abdomen, lead driven straight into his heart. As he lay gasping for air and choking up blood, their frightened daughter ran to her father. Instinctually, Mariandra turned away from the killers, shielding her stomach and her unborn baby from the senseless carnage unfolding around her. She prayed the armed thugs would leave so she could take her husband to the hospital. Instead, one of them grabbed her violently by the arm and demanded that she go downstairs with them. She refused. As they screamed at each other, Mariandra's young daughter raised her hand as though she had a question. With an innocence that only a child could display, she said calmly, "I've got money. You can take my money. I've got a piggy bank." With that, she begged the wild savages to leave her mommy alone. Neither of them seemed to pay the little girl any attention, but they kept trying to wrestle Mariandra down the stairs. But her dying father had heard his little girl's words. Johann summoned what fleeting strength he had left and took 2 steps toward the men. "Please," he gasped from blood-drowned lungs. The man with the shotgun stepped toward Johann and raised it to his head while the daughter cried, "No, no, no." In a fraction of a second, Johann collapsed to the floor in a pool of his own blood, executed at point-blank range. The murderers raised the shotgun to Mariandra's head. "Where are the rest of the children?" they screamed. She didn't answer, but continued wrestling with the armed robbers and screaming for them to leave. Finally, having for whatever reason tired of their cruel sport, the 2 men grabbed the couple's cell phones, opened the front door, and left. Because they had taken the phones, their final cruel act was to prevent Mariandra from even calling for help. The previous story isn't fictional.
So before he goes on, let me just say, horrible story, horrific story. I can't find the correct word to express just how terrible that incident was. I also heard him call those black men demons, savages. Now, after people had literally beat Jesus all night long, spit upon him, murdered him for no just reason, strung him on a cross. And the Bible says beat him to the point that you couldn't recognize him. He didn't say anything about these savages or these demons. He said exactly what Erica Kirk said. Father, forgive them. But that is not what you're going to hear from this man. Let's keep listening.
I wish it were. I even wish that, not being fictional, it was at least an outlier, a crime so rare as to turn the heads of the world. Instead, it's an all too common experience for South Africans, especially for those known as Afrikaners or Boers, white descendants of Dutch settlers who came to the area centuries ago to build small outposts of Christian civilization in an otherwise hostile and savage land. Johann Hunis was one such descendant, murdered on his small...
We can't let it go. We cannot let it go. Those Christian people that he is talking about and those savages, once again, he uses that word to describe black people. This is white Christian nationalism. And they did not go there and settle that land. They went there and stole that land violently, brutally, murderously. And I'm going to show you the cost to those black South Africans from what these people did to them, these Dutch descendants. It was horrific, horrible. And like he said, it went on for centuries. Let him keep going.
Rental property on September 30th, 2016. His wife, Mariandra, was 9 months pregnant when it happened and would deliver their fourth child, AJ, shortly after her husband was killed. Farm murders aren't an uncommon or new phenomenon either. In fact, they've been an ongoing reality since apartheid ended in the early 1990s and Nelson Mandela's political partner, Peter Mokaba, started singing "Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer" at political rallies for the African National Congress, or ANC, the party that Mandela headed. While the West portrayed Mandela as a hero, he was in fact a Marxist terrorist leading a bloody revolution against Christendom, and with it, white men.
Absolutely not. He was a man who was committed and dedicated to freeing his homeland from invaders, from colonizers, from white supremacists who had come and again treated the black South Africans worse than animals. He was not, again, some revolutionary trying to destroy Christendom. These men were hardly Christians, the way they treated fellow human beings. So all of this is the talk of white Christian nationalism. You hear it wide open, full stop. And it's going to get worse. Stay with me.
And he was aided in his efforts by globalist Western powers, including Jimmy Carter, who sought to bring gay race communism to every corner of the world. As he did in Rhodesia, Carter actually supported communist guerrillas in the effort to turn a once prosperous Rhodesia into the genocidal hellscape of Zimbabwe.
Speaking of Rhodesia, which is named after Cecil Rhodes, who was an extremely racist man, who caused the death of many, many black South Africans, a colonizer, a white supremacist. And it was their right to take that back from Cecil Rhodes and rename it Zimbabwe. So everything coming from this man's mouth is white Christian nationalism wrapped in white supremacy and racism and a whole lot of hate.
Mandela's wife, Winnie, was well known for her endorsement of brutal tactics used against political enemies. One of the most famous was her public support of necklacing, which was the practice of taking a tire filled with gasoline and putting it around a person's neck, then lighting it on fire while their hands were tightly bound behind their back, usually with wire. The victim would be kicked, hit, and stoned while burning alive. So why is violence against white farmers?
So Winnie Mandela denied all of those claims. Okay. And I don't know enough about what she did or didn't do to even comment. But I can say this. She stood by her husband's side, who spent decades in prison for no reason other than trying to free his homeland. And she stood beside him, and she kept that organization going as they fought against this white supremacist regime led by P.W. Botha and the Kirk and other Afrikaners who had done injustice after injustice after injustice after injustice to black South Africans, who were the majority in South Africa. When I was in college in the 80s, late 80s, I actually marched with the Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. and his two sons, Jesse Jackson Jr. and Jonathan, in an effort to get American corporations to divest from South Africa because of the injustice that that regime was doing to those innocent black South Africans. So he is revising history here. He's putting a white supremacist spin on it. Again, this is white Christian nationalism.
Farmers exploded in the region because Mandela and his political descendants have pushed for it repeatedly and specifically over the years without apology. Makoba ran the ANC's youth league, ANCYL, for many years, and this is often the most radical element of the party, before the presidential role of the ANCYL was passed on to Julius Malema in 2008, a disciple of Winnie and Makoba. Malema often called for radical confiscation of white-owned lands via bloody revolution and blamed the problems within black communities on whites. Malema was an early, staunch supporter of Jacob Zuma, president of the ANC from 2007 to 2016.
Why? Tell me this. Why wasn't it absolutely right for black South Africans to want their land back after an invader came in and took and stole their land? Why wouldn't they want it back after apartheid ended? Especially when the white South African, the Afrikaners, especially when they now own 80 to 90% of the land in South Africa. And the majority black population owns obviously the rest. Why wouldn't they want their land back? It was stolen from them. It was stolen. This is not a hard concept. That is a violation of one of the 10 Commandments. I mean, it's not hard to see that they violated Scripture, going in, colonizing this country this way, and committing all types of heinous, murderous crimes that I'll show you in just a moment. Because he's trying to make it sound as if black men, in fact, he's going to say it, are the most violent people in the world. He's just completely overlooked all the violence that has come from white men who are truly the most violent on the planet.
17. Zuma and Malema would go on to call their white opponents cockroaches, a word that harkened back to the Rwandan genocide and the language used to justify the large-scale killing of the Tutsi. In 2011, with Zuma sitting behind him, Malema said, "Once we agree they, white people, stole our land, we can agree that they are criminals and must be treated as such." In 2010, Malema addressed a crowd at the University of Johannesburg, suddenly bursting in a song. The words went like this: "They are scared, the cowards. Shoot the boar. Rape these dogs." Not surprisingly, farm attacks and farm murders spiked afterwards, as they do every time an ANC politician uses such rhetoric. A Malema supporter then wrote the following on Malema's Facebook page: 3,000 farmers dead since '94. We lost more people than that. We are far from being even. So kill De Boer, kill the farmer. After Malema was kicked out of the ANCYL for disrupting the party, he started the Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF, an outspokenly communist and black nationalist group, in 2013. In 2018, the group rioted over the use of Afrikaans as a viable language in Afrikaans schools and sang the following: "One of you, you must die. Shoot to kill the Boer. White man, you must die." In his book, Kill the Boer, Ernst Roets provides data behind the decades of Afrikaner farm murders and tells the many tragic stories of those murdered by blacks. Roets is an attorney and CEO of AfriForum, which seeks to defend the rights of white Christians in South Africa. He even appeared on Tucker Carlson's podcast in March of 2025 to talk about a white genocide that most media outlets refuse to cover, let alone acknowledge. Data on farm murders is hard to track since the South African government doesn't have a vested interest in reporting it and often doesn't at all. Even so, Fox News has gone so far as to say that...
Yeah, Fox News. Okay, so we believe whatever Fox News says. Well, the truth of the matter is the president of South Africa said here on this soil during a visit to the White House that there was not those murders, wholesale murders of white farmers. And several of the white South Africans who live here in America, who do business here in America, a couple of golfers, in fact, they verified that there are have been some killing, some murders of white farmers, but a whole lot more of black people, just like here. Most of the murders that go on here that are committed by black men are committed on other black men. Yet he's trying to say that there's some genocide going on. that has been refuted. That has been refuted. Yet he keeps saying it. It has been refuted even by white Afrikaners. All right, let's go back to him so he can continue this.
Corruption in the South African government led officials there to cover up the white genocide happening under their rule. Reuters wrote the following in an article. In a country cursed by one of the world's highest murder rates, being a white farmer makes a violent death an even higher risk. Some of South Africa's predominantly white commercial farmers go as far as to brand the farm killings a genocide. Reuters does a good job showing that even with the limited data available, murders have occurred at an alarming rate. From 2001 to 2007, for example, 587 farm murders were committed during 4,869 farm attacks. On average, this means 98 murders and 812 attacks occurred per year, or roughly 2 murders per week. Because of the farm murders, Genocide Watch has continued to rate South Africa as a powder keg of potential racial violence committed against whites.
So remember that number, 587. We don't have any way to verify it, but let's just assume that it is. Let's assume that it is accurate. 587. Remember that number.
While volumes could be written about Mandela, Marxism, and the West's guilty role in furthering racial hatred and murder against white Christians in South Africa, the reality is that South Africa stands as an example of where the gay-raced communist agenda seeks to take a nation. It may start with liberal Marxist professors pushing radical sexual liberation or civil rights politics, as happened in America in the 1960s and 70s, but it ends with intensified racial animosity and unchecked violence against whites. It may start in the classroom, but it ends at the barrel of a gun.
You see, when you are used to being in power, conceding some of that power so that other people can be treated fairly makes you feel like you're being oppressed. Although you're still very much in control, you still very much own everything, but just ceding just some power to let some other folk at least have some semblance of justice is oppression. And that's what I hear coming from this man.
As Jeremy Carl has demonstrated in his great book, The Unprotected Class, How Anti-White Racism is Tearing America Apart, the beginning of these things is not in our distant future here in America, but our past and our present. Our entire political, economic, and educational systems are already, and long have been, weighted against whites in favor of blacks and other minorities. When a black dies of a fentanyl overdose in the streets of Minneapolis while being restrained by a white cop, as was the case with Officer Derek Chauvin and career criminal George Floyd, the black Floyd was given a martyr's funeral. Chauvin was sent to prison to make an example of him to the rest of the white populace. This is what happens when you try to enforce law and order on us. When the white Austin Metcalf, age 17, was stabbed to death on April 2nd, 2025 by the black Carmelo Anthony.
Well, wow, that's a lot. And let me just say, Derek Chauvin was found guilty by a jury who heard evidence presented by medical experts. And the prosecution's expert rebunked all of what he just said, fentanyl and all of that leading or causing George Floyd's death. It was asphyxiation from Derek Chauvin's knee being on the neck, the back, the lungs of Mr. Floyd, if I recall, for 9 minutes and some change. That's what caused his death. And the jury found him guilty. And then he pled guilty in federal court, and he appealed. He actually appealed his state court conviction, and the appellate court held it up. And so now he comes back now and says, no, everybody got it wrong. All the jury members got it wrong. The appeals court got it wrong. Even Derek Chauvin got it wrong. by basically admitting to it and being sentenced in federal court. I don't think he spent not one day in that courtroom hearing all the evidence. So let me go ahead at this point and seriously refute a lot of what he said about South Africa. Now, remember, he said some 587, 590, maybe 600 white farmers lost their lives because black South Africans were trying to get land back that actually was stolen from them. Now, I'm not saying the way to do that is to go in there and murder anybody. It is my understanding that the South African government came up with a program to recover some of that land that was stolen from them. A lot of the black South Africans today are still in poverty. 30 years after apartheid ended because they don't have any land. So, in his mind, it is an injustice for these people to try to get their land back. I mean, think about it. If somebody comes in your house, invades your home, like that sad story he told, invades your home, takes over your home, takes over your family, takes over your children, colonize them. And then one day you return to take your house back, to take your family back. And he says that is an injustice. Well, again, let's talk about some of the other horrific events and incidents that occurred in South Africa. Estimated deaths and rights violations of black South Africans under white rule. So that's what I'm going to share with you. After South Africa ended apartheid, they commissioned a group of folks to investigate the impact of apartheid on South Africa. It's called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And it was chaired by Bishop Tutu. Bishop Tutu. And so this report that I'm going to read some information from is going to help us see that white South Africans were not the Christians that this pastor is trying to make them out to be. Okay? Those Afrikaners, those Dutch descendants, were not the good Christians that this man tried to make them out to be. Okay? So here's what Bishop Tutu wrote as the foreword. He says, all South Africans know that our recent history is littered with some horrendous occurrences. All right? I really wish this pastor was listening to this. With some horrendous occurrences. The Sharpeville and Langa killings. The Soweto uprising. I remember white South Afrikaners murdered scores of South African children. I mean murdered scores. I think it was over 100. And I believe they killed children in mass numbers like that several times. Just shot them down. Just literally shot them down. Why doesn't this man value those children's lives? Why is he placing all the value on that family that was tortured by those two evil guys and all the other black South Africans who just suffered at the hands of those white Afrikaners? Why doesn't he value their suffering? It's almost like they, as he called them, are just flat out savages. Savages. What kind of Christianity is this? No, this is not Christianity. This is white Christian nationalism. Bishop Tutu goes on to say Magoo's Bar, the Church Street bombing, Magoo's Bar, the Amazamati, I don't know how to pronounce some of these African names, but Amazon Toti, Wimpy Bar bombing, the St. James Church killings, the Borpatong and Sabaking. We also knew about the deaths in detention of people such as Steve Biko. He was another South African leader fighting against apartheid. Neil Agate and others' neck lacings. So not only did blacks do neck lacings, but whites did it to blacks. And the so-called black-on-black violence on the East Rand and KwaZulu Natal, which arose from the rivalries between IFP and first the UDF and later the ANC. Our country, listen at Bishop Tutu here, our country is soaked in the blood of her children, of all races, of all political persuasions, because of the invaders, the so-called conquerors, the colonizers who went in there and committed these horrible, horrific acts. All right, number 2 of this forward. Bishop Tutu goes on to say, it is this contemporary history which began in 1960 when the Sharpeville disaster took place and ended with the wonderful inauguration of Nelson Mandela as the first democratically elected president of the Republic of South Africa. So here it was 300 and something years later, before the majority black South African people were able to elect the person of their choice. They had been denied the ability to vote for all those centuries. But that seems to be okay for this pastor. We could not pretend it did not happen. Everyone agrees that South Africans must deal with that history and its legacy. It is how we do this that is in question. A bone of contention throughout the life of the commission, right up to the time when this report was being written. And I imagine we can assume that this particular point will remain controversial for a long time to come. All right, let's get into some of the details of the report. What did they talk about? Well, this is in reference to the deponents. Those are the people that were deposed by the commission. And this report says the deponents came to the commission to tell about gross violations of human rights that had been experienced either by themselves or by someone close to them. Does this pastor care about this? These are acts that were committed by, as he said, these good Christians, these good Christian Dutch descendants. Wow. In total, the 21,000 statements made to the commission contain nearly 38,000 allegations of gross violations of human rights, of which nearly 10,000 were killings. Now let's remember that 587 alleged murders of white Afrikaners. So we're already way ahead of that. 10,000 were killings, and this was from these deponents. And I can tell you, they didn't talk with many people because many of them were afraid to even talk with the commission. And also keep in mind, look at the historical periods. The commission's mandate period covered 4 major historical periods from 1960 to 1994. That was 34 years out of 3.5 centuries. And in that 34 years, 10,000 killings, 38,000 allegations of gross violation of human rights. Compare that to the 500 or so alleged murders. It's alleged because we haven't been able to verify that. Now, Here is the cumulative death toll of those good Christian white Dutch descendants, the British, the Afrikaners. Here is the cumulative estimated death toll of black South Africans. Colonial frontier wars and conquest. So when they came in and colonized, as he said, settled the land, they killed 60 to 80,000 black South Africans. So now we're way above that 500. 60 to 80,000 to take the land, to take it. Boer War, black camps, another 14 to 20,000 black South African deaths. 20th century massacres, 1,000 to 5,000. Apartheid era direct killings, 20 to 30,000. Structural mortality, forced removals. Yeah, let me talk about that a moment. That's how the white South Afrikaners got the land in the first place. They violently forced the black Africans off their land, which resulted in 50 to over 100,000 deaths. The grand total is somewhere between 230,000 to 250,000 deaths, compared to the 500 or so alleged deaths that were caused by black South Africans trying to recover land that they were violently, forcefully, unlawfully, unjustifiably removed from. But in his mind, no big deal. White European men have done that across the globe. Obviously, they did so here. Millions of Native Americans were genocide here for this land. And some from Mexico. European men. Yet, you're going to hear this guy say that we are the most violent on the planet. And we haven't come close, not even a fraction as black men, of killing all the people that they've killed. This is white Christian nationalism. This is not Christianity. This is not the spirit of Christ. And then let's talk about the atrocities in Congo. Because we know in 1885, 84, somewhere along there, European powers divided up Africa like a pizza and took various parts of it and rampaged through the continent, stealing natural resources, killing the people. Yet we're the violent ones. Yet black men are the violent ones. One man alone, the bearded man, Leopold II, took untold numbers of lives. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on him because I am preparing a video now about all that he did in the Congo. That video is coming up. It is the Black Holocaust. The media hides. But he took innumerable millions of lives. Millions. 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 And we're supposed to be the most violent men on the planet. This doesn't make any sense. All that he's going to go on to say. It's going to be shocking to hear what he says in light of all this evidence. And we haven't even brought up slavery. But here we are, slave ships, our ancestors in the belly of these awful slave ships being brought over here to work free for these good Christian people, which is a clear violation, by the way, of James chapter 5, I believe it is, stealing people's wages. Our ancestors were treated worse than animals. And it's estimated that between 8.8 and 15.8 million Africans died as a direct result of Europe's transatlantic slave system from the moment of capture on the continent of Africa to the brutal years of enslavement, including those conditioning years in the Caribbean before they even got to North America. Portugal, Britain, Spain, France, Netherlands, and of course, America. And if you wish to research this, here are all the citations. Here are all the receipts. Yet black men are supposed to be the most dangerous on the planet. Black men have killed more white men? Really? These are lies. What you're going to hear him say.
Over a rather insignificant argument, several GoFundMe accounts were started, not for Metcalf, but for Anthony. Again, the aim of the regime, which includes the mass media strong arm, is to...
Now, he is going in this clip to get into that brutal murder of the young white girl on a Charlotte subway, I think it was. And no question, brutal. And he want to get into that graphically. I'm not going to play it because it's horrible, but it doesn't make the point that he wants it to make. And that is, it shows just how violent and vicious black men are and how much we target white people. There is no story that he can point to that compares to the receipts that I just gave you about all the murder, all the killings, all the human rights violations, all the lynchings, the enslavement, the robbery, the thievery that white men have done to us black men. There's no story that he can tell, no anecdote, no matter how terrible and awful it is. And I will acknowledge that the couple of stories that he has told is absolutely awful. But he's also not only trying to make black men look like vicious animals, and he's going to use that term a lot, but also he is aiming for the Civil Rights Act. He's aiming for anything that was done, again, to give African Americans a semblance of equity and justice. Because, as I said earlier, when you've had power, absolute power over a people, and then you have to give just a little bit. The way Malcolm X said it was, if you got that knife in somebody's back 2 inches and you pull it out an inch, you really didn't do very much for that person. But for this mindset that this guy has, you just oppressed him because you got him to pull the knife out an inch. Now he feels like the victim. This is white Christian nationalism. This is not Christianity. I will defend my faith, my Lord. I will defend it from this all day long, every day. This is not the Christ, the Jesus of the Bible. And I want you black men who are hearing this, don't you throw away your faith or turn away from Jesus because of men like this. because he's not representing Christ in what he's saying.